excuse me. Meeny, meeny, tekel, upharsin. The handwriting on the wall. Daniel 5:25. Great story for those of you who haven't read it. No. Don't worry, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here on Saturday, June 18th, 2016 at 15:53 in the afternoon Eastern Time. And no, this isn't going to be one of my theological digressions. So all of the atheists and agnostics that we're getting ready to click off, you can stick around. This was prompted by an email from a friend of mine, well, very early this morning, actually, about his job situation at work, and I won't go into any really specific details. It's not Paul. But it had to do with some workplace politics, and I'm sure that anybody who's been employed for any length of time has experienced workplace politics. Flies. When I was working at, how should we say, a major central Ohio hospital back in the late 1980s and very early 1990s, it became clear that the administration and the hired hands in the anesthesia department that were hired by the administration would like nothing more than to run me out. And there's an easy way to run a doc. When you have independent practices in an anesthesia department at a hospital, there's an easy way to eventually get some guy out. Is you give him all the non-pay cases. You make the schedule such that he has to come in the morning to do a case, and he sits around on his ass till 5 in the afternoon to do a case. It's going to be a really long case into the night, and then, of course, you have to come back next day. If he's on second call, you tack on lots of add-ons that the first call guy somehow doesn't end up doing, and then you have to come back into work the next day. That worked up until the time that, I didn't get out of there till 3 in the morning, and I was a vegetable, and I refused to come in the next day. That's the only time I ever refused to come in the next day, because I would have been a threat to my patients. A fellow afterwards said, "You should have been severely punished for that." I just laughed at him. This guy was a real piece of work. In any case, leaving aside that fact, I really knew they had it in for me when you'd go up, if the patient was going to stay in the hospital and not be discharged home that day, you'd go up and try to see them, if not that day, the next day, to see if there were any major problems that you might have caused. And then you always check the chart to see what the nurses were writing about the patient, because the nurses' notes are, in a way, the most reliable source of information about a patient in the hospital. Leaving aside the obvious cover their ass phrases, at least you get some information out of it. And then you look for your anesthesia record, because that's where you want to make your post-op note, after you've talked to the patient and so forth. If the patient's to be found, sometimes they're done getting x-rays or physical therapy or something or other. or they're in the can or something. Anyway, you want to always see, you know, leave a note. And I often couldn't find the anesthesia record. Now, you know, I had done the case the day before or 2 days before. You know, the anesthesia record should be in the chart. It wasn't there. No, all right. That's suspicious in and of itself. But then what would happen is, you know, a lot of times, you always have to go down to medical records to be sure all the signatures are up to date, you know, and they'd stick things in your box, charts in your box to sign. And so now we're talking about 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks after the fact of this stuff. And you'd run across these charts whose anesthesia records you couldn't find up on the ward, but they were in the chart. Didn't look like they'd been changed at all. But you go through the orders that they want you to sign. There were orders there written under my name, my verbal order, that I had never given. So I refused to sign them. Dr. Kersey, it's a Medicare patient. You have to sign these things. I said, I didn't give that order. I'm not going to sign something I didn't do. I said, find out who did give the verbal order, but it wasn't me. No, Dr. Kersey, you're going to mess up our records. I said, no, I'm not going to mess up your records. Somebody else has messed up your records. Well, you know, I'm always slow in the uptake, and then it finally dawned on me that these guys, what this other, you know, this hired hand group was doing was, these guys were going around up under the floor after, you know, I had done a patient, and they were taking the chart out of the, you know, my anesthesia record out of the chart and photocopying it, and they were slow to get it back. They didn't scamper down, copy it, and then scamper back up. I mean, they took a day or two to get it back into the chart. And well, you know, that's sort of like, you know, and of course I knew that they were getting ready to they were trying to drive me out, and I had sort of vowed to hang on grimly as long as I could, well, until I had made enough money to retire. And so when I had reached that point, thank you, God. Sorry, atheists. You know, it was just like it's like when's, what's going to tip me over the edge? And that was when I may have mentioned this in earlier videos, many months, couple of years, a year or so or more back, maybe. They had been asking me to take over a case in the middle of a case on a patient that I had not started the case. I had not talked to the patient. And it was for this hired hand group, but they had an emergency coming in, and they were going to, so of course, you want to take care of people, so you take care of people. And you'd be in there a couple, 3 hours, and of course I can't send a bill to that patient for my time. But you take care of the patient. And this one guy said, I've got to do this, but I'll need you to take call for me tonight. And I'm in the room squeezing the bag. I'm in the room doing a case. And a pretty fucking damn tough-ass case, too, by the way. It's a chest case. That was odd that they gave me something like that. Oh, I'm sorry. It's because it was a Medicaid patient. It was a non-paid patient. Okay. At least it was professionally challenging. So, you're trying not to move the lung in the field when the surgeon's down in there in the lung. And, Meanwhile, politician man's in here, talking. So I said, no. And I'm looking over the drapes to be sure I'm not fucking up the case, and then I turned my head to him. I said, during the time you can't breathe while the guy's working, down near the pulmonary artery. I said to the guy, this hired tool from the administration, I said, I'm out of here. When I take this patient to the recovery room and I'm sure he's okay. I'm out of here. I mean, this is it. I mean, this is my last day. I'm out of here. And I did. And I walked out. I came back next day to pick up stuff out of my locker that I wasn't able to take home that night. Notice the operative word night. And the interesting thing happened about 5 or 6 weeks later. I got a big, thick package of materials from medical records. Well, I had gone down in the interim to sign my extant, charts. They feed in at medical records to get all this stuff cleared out. And the last time I went, I asked them the individual who was running medical records, and they were always very pleasant and kind to me down there and decent. I mean, they weren't, I said, have I signed all my backlog? Yes, doctor, you have. Great. So then 6 weeks later, which maybe now makes it almost 3 months later, in comes this big, thick envelope full of materials. Now, some of them were photographed. Well, they were all photocopies. They were all photocopies of patient charts. Most of them were photocopies of orders, drug orders, patient care orders in recovery room, that sort of thing. A number of them were on patients that I had not personally worked on. Nor had I, during the few days, a month that I had to supervise nurse anesthetists, which I hated doing. But nonetheless, but nor were they, some of these were, patients on whom even the nurse anesthetist I had been supervising on a given day, and I kept records of all that. I had never had any contact with these patients, and even secondhand. And they had all these verbal orders, Dr. Kersey, verbal orders, Dr. Kersey, verbal orders, Dr. Kersey. I'm not going to sign that. See, and interestingly, they were all Medicare patients. What these guys were trying to do is to set me up for a charge of Medicare fraud. That's what they were trying to do. In this case, I was not slow in the uptake. So I just never sent anything back. I obviously didn't sign it. Meanie, tickle, you farson. Even after the writing starting to fade from the wall. Yeah, workplace politics, isn't it great? Well, sometimes you need to know when to cut your losses. Always have a plan. Always have a plan. Well, there. That gets that off my head. This is kind of one of those now it can be told things. Today's been a very benign day. It's, mid-70s. Beautiful skies, dry, no rain expected until next Tuesday, which is shitty for the farmers. And coming from an agricultural background, that means I sort of feel shitty for the farmers. A woman at church called me on my cell phone last night about 7:30, just as I was getting ready to go to bed. We were going to my little hidey hole in the north bedroom. Talked to me for an hour and a half about stuff I already knew, and we had gone over time and time again months before. Okay. All right. This helped. Then earlier this morning, I got an email from a younger friend of mine, also in the UK, about, some financial things that he and his boyfriend are going through. I can't go into any details on that. And then, having said all of this, I'll now tell you this. In for a penny, in for a pound. I guess in for a pence now. In for a pound. I don't know why I got thinking about this, but one of the guys that was trying to drive me out of, a major central Ohio hospital had his license revoked by the state of Ohio because, summarily revoked, because he was found with a syringe full of fentanyl or sufentanil. It's one of the two. Hanging out of the dorsal vein of his penis while he was sitting on the can in the surgeon's locker room, in the toilet. Oh, on the can, yeah. That's redundant, I'm sorry. He was slumped over against the stall wall, unconscious. But he survived. Out the door. Well, as rightfully so. With that kind of stuff going on. And then, interestingly, after I learned about that, and I learned about that maybe even a year or so later after I left, then I learned from some friends up in, how shall we say, a major northeastern city in Indiana, at one of the 3 hospitals up in that major northeastern city in Indiana, northeast Indiana city, that a guy that was in the anesthesia group, sort of for which and in which I worked when I was up in that city for 15 months, had been found also slumped over against the wall, while he was sitting on the toilet, was a syringe full of fentanyl hanging out of the dorsal vein of his penis. I don't know. I can't remember clearly whether he survived or not. If he didn't survive, then that would belie his actual name and be a true irony. Some people have all the... I guess he didn't have the... he's a nice guy. Oh, both these guys are nice guys. I actually sold the fella in Columbus one of my firearms that I didn't particularly like, just because of, just didn't like the way it shot, but it was a perfectly good firearm. Casual sale. I knew the guy well. No untoward prior background at that time, I guess. I don't know why. Well, but I connected with that because of the fact that he was one of the instigators of trying to, drive me out of this place with these scheming things. But actually, he probably wasn't. He was being egged on by another guy who was the son of a mafia guy. Well, son of a deceased mafia guy from Cleveland who had been blown away in front of him when he was 13. That'll color your vision of the world, won't it? He was still an asshole. I now start to scatter. Off to church at 8. The 8 o'clock service tomorrow, and Paul's still at work. And I've been watching the U.S. Open today, and I watched some YouTube today. And I shaved so I don't have to shave in the morning for church. So I'll say bye-bye, YouTubers, and all of the fathers out there. Happy greeting card day tomorrow. Alrighty, bye-bye, YouTubers.